Our screws are on. We're ready now to move on to the next stage, which is creating the bridge. To work out the height of the bridge, place a ruler on the fretboard and start with something the size of a pencil. Whatever piece of wood you're using, you need to make sure there is a good gap of at least 2.5 to 3 millimeters between the fret and the ruler at the midway point on the neck. And what I suggest you do is to make a couple of mock-up bridges first, small square pieces of wood, to test the heights to get the best action for your instrument. Start with something maybe 9 or 10 millimeters high. Okay, I've got some 4 millimeter beechwood. This is ideal. We want to make it the same sort of size as a pencil, about 45 millimeters long. And that will be our first mock-up. When we have our bridge, we're not going to make any fancy holes on this mock-up one, but we'll have our bridge, and I say we start to 9 and 12 millimeters to begin with, and then you can plane it down. And what I suggest you do is to shape it so that it's like a triangle, as a trapezium effect, so you plane away. So there's a point about 1 millimeter wide, maybe 2 millimeters wide at the top. And that's going to be our mock-up bridge. And you can make these in a couple of sizes if you want to make a couple of different heights and try them out. We make this before we get the strings on, before we get tailpiece on, so we have it ready. The good thing about this instrument is because it's a floating bridge, nothing's glued, nothing's held in place, so we can adjust the bridge and move it around. Once the strings are on, we can then take the bridge off, put it on again, and whittle it down if we need to, make it thinner, make it higher, add some, and if you want to, you can add a piece of wood under it to see how that works. So it's a very flexible arrangement, and it takes the pressure off. You're not gluing something in place permanently. It's just held purely by the tension of the strings. And you've got quite a wide area with the piezo under here to place it as well, going up and down with some, you probably need to add a few millimeters extra to the string length for the compensation, but we'll get to that at the stringing stage. We're just going to saw this out. I'll do it on the bandsaw very quickly. Okay. So now is a good opportunity to use your disc sander. Okay, with the shapes, and then going to make a mark in the middle. And we don't want to touch that line, but we do want to angle this so that it becomes a triangle shape. Use this piece of scrap. It's going to be quite tricky to do. Be careful with your fingers. So the difference between this and the finer bridge really is that we're going to make a little arch underneath and shape the ends off the wood nicely, give it a bit of form. But we'll do that once we know that we've got the final size, and we may make a final prettier bridge than this using a decorative piece of wood. This is a piece of beech, which is perfectly fine, maple beech. I've got other pieces of woods that I use for this, and some figured birch. I've got some other figured woods. So sometimes I use any scrap pieces that are beautiful. Just needs to be hard enough for the strings. You can add a piece of ebony or other hardwood on top as well if you want to make a sandwich, but it's not necessary. These are the tailpieces that I supply for stick dulcimers, and these will work very well for this instrument too, even though it's 4 strings. You just need to make sure that you put the 2 first strings through the first hole, and that leaves the other 2 holes for the other 2 strings. And it works very well. And to place it, it's not. You need to make sure that the neck. You need to make sure the neck doesn't matter if it's not centered on the body. Put a temporary piece of masking tape on the body at the moment. I'm just going to mark on where the actual center line is, which is maybe different once you're finished and done from the center line, because you need to make sure that the center string is as close to center as you can make it. So I'm using the neck and the ruler, marking on where that will be. And some boxes aren't square, and sometimes the neck is slightly off center. It doesn't matter at all for this instrument. If it's just fractioning it out, you don't worry about it. It's fine, that's the same width as the neck. That's where we think the center line is, and then we see whether it lines up to the center line already marked on the body. And in this case, got almost, it's just maybe a millimeter. So we need to make, then we take our tailpiece, and we need to make sure that the string holes clear the top. So a good way to do that is to take something, maybe a 2mm piece, just to raise it up. A couple of pieces of card will do actually. Check you've got clearance using a fine awl or a pin. You want to make sure that it's raised enough above there. Get your square and extend the line down. Okay, so we're going to move this over. If you can see, it's the point where you see the pencil line match up. That's the point where you're going to put your awl mark. We need to use a finer drill bit, so we want a finer drill bit. And this is where the woods may affect your choice. So I would start with a smaller drill bit and see how the screw goes. What you want is a good fit of the screw. So we have some 5mm ukulele bone nuts, and these are a good choice. It should be a piston fit. So the first thing we do with our bone nut is to trim it to size. And then we need to trim the height. Rest our pencil on here. Now what you want to do is to cut this maybe about 1mm higher than that at first, and then see how that goes. The good thing is with the zero nut doing all the work is that the nut is just directing the strings to the tuning pegs. You can use a hacksaw to cut bone. Woodworking tools, you can use the disc sander also, but bear in mind you will need to use extraction or do the sanding outside because the bone dust is lethal and stinks. Okay, so at the moment, so we've got a good tapered shape leaning back on the headstock. This is still about 1mm too high here. So what we're going to do, we're going to sand this down by hand now with files and sandpaper. We won't touch this side or this side so that it sits nicely in the slot. Just file away, round that over so it's a nice rounded edge. We want the string to roll over this side and go towards the pegs. So we're just going to mark with, so we need to mark on. It's just this top edge that we wish to sand. We want to leave this face clear and the base clear, and we will polish the one end. We just need to gently polish the rough end on here. I'm using a 600 grit. We're just going to slightly level off the top and then gradually round over the back edge a little bit. If you want to make a bit more progress, you could use the finer end of a file. We'll do the edges once we mark the strings positions on. Put a dot of glue just to hold this in position. And this will guide the string to the peg. We won't do that until we've got the pegs on because we need to be accurate when we mark out the string positions, and then we mark out which angle we want to take the string to. You can follow if you're following the plans exactly, then you can just use the plans. I like to do every instrument individually if I can, just to make sure that the string is following through clearly and cleanly. I prefer to lay out every instrument individually if I can. I prefer to lay out every instrument individually just to make sure that the string passes through, that the string passes in a straight line from the nut. So you need to guide it by just angling some of the slots so it reaches in the right place. If I buy 2 sets of guitar tuners, this is from a 3-a-side set, it gives me enough pegs for 3 instruments of this. With 10mm holes already drilled, it's just a question of fitting these. And at first we fit them quite lightly. Use a 10mm spanner to tighten these up. Don't over tighten because the threads can break on these if you over tighten. You want to get it so it's finger tight. Just finger tight enough so that it holds it in position. Just finger tight pressure. So you can, this just allows you to move this in position. You turn it on the reverse side. And what you want to do with these kinds of pegs is you'd like them to be square as possible to the headstock on this one. Different schools of thought in terms of angling the pegs, but when you're happy with the position, I tend to mark this with a pencil first. And then we need to use an awl. Choose a point in the center of where the pin needs to go. This will guide your drill bit. To allow the screw to work, we need to drill a hole that's thinner than the diameter of this particular screw. If we measure, this is 1.9 outer diameter. So for a 1.9 diameter, we're probably looking for like a 1.5mm drill bit. If you want to test this out with a scrap piece of wood first to make sure that it can go in and turn nicely, what you don't want is a loose screw. In the same way, you don't want to be snapping the screw off if it's made of brass. These might be plated steel, but they also, if they're brass, they're much softer than steel. So you have to go carefully, fit these first with a steel version of this, and then put these as finishing screws. So take a 1.5mm drill bit. To make sure we do not drill down too deeply, take the decorator's tape. We're just going to put it on. This ensures it only goes down as deep as required for the drill bit. Okay, once these are screwed in place, you can just tighten this up just a tiny fragment at a time, just to stop any rattling. And in terms of string spacing, a 4-string instrument, we have a double string here, and we have the bass string, and then we have the middle string. And there are different schools of thought to how wide the melody string should be. On the other ones I build, I have a narrow neck, which is closer to the 3-string instrument. And so the spacing on that is a little bit tighter. And I use like a 9 to 9.5 spacing and a 2.5 millimeter spacing of the double strings. On this wider neck, I'm going to be closer to like a Merlin seagull, I think, in the terms of I'm going to make it, we'll leave about 3.6 millimeters here, 3.6 millimeters on the end, which leaves us about 11 and a half, I believe, between, and then 2.8 for the between the double strings. That gives us a good spacing. This is similar spacing to a classical guitar nut, and so that's plenty of space for wider fingers if you're. So just why the 33 millimeters just gives you wider spacing if you want a wider spacing. My own personal instruments, I will use 30. I like the feel of a mandolin neck, so I like that sort of feel. The 33 millimeters, fractionally bigger, gives you more strength. I prefer to use 33 millimeters on a softer neck like a poplar neck. So that's pretty much where we're going. That should all add up if everything's right. 3.6, 7.5, 11.5, and 2.8, 33. Yeah, so 33. Just a quick sum to double check. Just a quick sum to double check I've got it added up correctly. If you're measuring everything with a vernier caliper, you can get accuracy down to 0.2 digital places for this one. Yeah, so on this instrument, on the tighter instrument, on the 30 millimeter instrument, what I tend to do is to keep it a similar edge. I often leave the bass string slightly further in, just how I play. That's how I like to play. So I would probably leave it 5 millimeters in, 4 to 5 millimeters on from the edge. That's the main difference between the narrower neck. But on a 33 millimeter neck, 3.6 works fine. It clears the chamfered edge, and it won't leave you popping the string over the edge. It's not too close. If you need to have it closer, if you need wider spacing, then you could forego the edge treatment that we've done with the chamfering. That way you can just round off the edges. Set your caliper to 0, gradually bring it up to 3.5, and then 3.6. Lock it in position. You can take the nut off. That's your spacing from either edge on the 33 millimeter nut. This you can actually use it as a scratch, I think. This is just setting the edges. Okay, and we know we set it back to 0, then we do the double strings. We're going for 2.8 on this one. Okay, 2.8. What we need to do is to make sure that the strings are going to feed nicely. So it may require us just angling. I'll make a note. Like for example, this back peg here has to go across at an angle. So we'll mark it on string number 2 that it goes to the correct position. It's just very slight angle here. And this first one, I think, is pretty much this first string. It's almost straight. I think it's almost straight, actually. very slight angle. I'm going to take this out. I have some specialist tools. This is a nut file, so it has, you can get files from StewMac that will do every string, different string size. This is acting as a string guide, but it needs to follow smoothly back. My way of doing this is to mark the initial positions with a knife, a sharp knife. Just going over that pencil line, following the angle back. The reason for doing this is I'm going to do a saw cut with a micro hobby saw. Get around to do its last one. So I'm going to use a very fine hobby saw. This is for model making, very fine. This is finer than the fret saw. So this, I think it might be 0.5 millimeter. Let me check. You should be able to feel that knife line. So you rest it on. Try and replicate that angle that you penciled on. Just done the initial marking. Online you can find cheap fret files, like these are brazing, for cleaning brazing rods. This is a common cheap kit sold for filing nuts. Very hard work. You're sometimes better off just using a piece of string, but these are useful for polishing the back edge where it leads off. The different schools of thought. If you were to file a V-slot using a square file, so this is a needle file, now that gives you a place with several contacts for the string to rest in, and if you change grades of string, it's unaffected, so it's always in the lowest part of the V-slot, however big the string is. So a V-slot, I've seen it on classical guitars, and it saves the need for matching exactly the size of the string. And for our purposes, because we're only guiding the string over the nut, it's the 0 fret sets the action, the 0 fret sets the height of the string. This just needs to be a clean and perfectly seamless. You're trying to follow the edge, over the edge. So the string is going to follow over the fret and gently be guided back over the bone nut. So you want good contact here, 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 and smooth. So you want it smooth at this point, certainly. But at this point, you could use the V-slot. That's certainly a possibility. So if you start with a saw cut. So for a V-slot, you start with the saw cuts we've done, and then you file in a V-slot. This is a square file, and you would hold it same as we did for the fret slots. We held this at the same angle. We're just going to use a 180 block. We're just going to round off the edges of the nuts. So it's just the very top edge and the back edge. And we won't set the very final height of these slots until after we have the strings on now.